So if you are involved in supply chain management, you know that this field is changing very, very quickly. And ironically, the technology that is changing the face of our global supply chains is the same technology that is struggling to give us tools to help us manage the nimble supply chain that it helped produce. So, you have things like, the internet and GPS and IoT devices, which have all made it easier for companies to have far-flung and diverse suppliers. But having a variety of international suppliers doesn't mean it's easy to keep up with their activities and the quality of their products. And this is just kind of a natural outgrowth of what happens when you have a global supply chain. So then you add to this natural disasters, trade wars, increasing regulation, customer demands, and of course internal politics within each country that you deal with. And it's kind of easy to see why managing a supply chain armed only with a spreadsheet probably isn't going to cut it. But fortunately, there are a number of promising technologies on the horizon that will help us keep pace with the complexities and the pressures of a global supply chain. And here to talk to us about some of these technologies is Tom Gosselin, Director of Supply Chain Services for DNV Business Assurance in North America. Hi, Tom.
Hey there. Hey, Dirk.
Hey, how's it going? Okay, let me get my glasses on here. You mentioned several technologies in that article, augmented reality, virtual reality, but you also mentioned blockchain, and I think that was really intriguing. So can you describe a little bit about blockchain? I think a lot of people have heard about it. It comes up in the news pretty often. I think it's most often associated with Bitcoin, I think. But tell us a little bit about blockchain, just layman's terms, and then how that is actually tying into supply chain management.
Yeah, I can understand that. Yeah, you hear blockchain, a lot of people hear Bitcoin, but it's not just a cryptocurrency. Blockchain is a transactional ledger, and you can imagine as being that where you can have certain transactions from source to the end product and have full visibility of truly who has kind of had their hands on that commodity or that product. And I'm talking about anything from a very complicated and complex piece of technology to a food ingredient, for example. So they're all different types of sourcing structures you're looking at here. But the at essence is able to provide assurance or proof of transaction from an original source. Let's say it's a textile company wanting to source from a certified cotton plantation. Well, then they would have that plantation or farm's details. Let's say if this is coming out of Uzbekistan, they would have that farm's details, and that certificate can follow, and we can prove also that it's followed the transactions and give greater visibility. So yes, it just truly allows a supply chain manager to determine, if applied properly, where the products are passed through. So you're looking through a kind of effective real-time view on a vertical supply chain rather than looking at just your first tier.
And what advantages does blockchain give you over maybe how electronic supply chain management is done right now, which, like, I guess kind of the brute force method is there's maybe a database in the cloud and all that information is collected there. What does blockchain give you?
Well, it gives you that certainty for sure, and you can look at previous examples of having mapped, for example, as you say, a electronic supply chain through the Dodd-Frank Act. Which mandated, full traceability of minerals that could derive from the Congo. That took a large, onerous approach in mapping that supply chain back to the smelters that processed these minerals that could have come from the Congo. If there was a blockchain approach to that, and we're not saying it's not complicated, then you can have certainty of exactly where the raw mineral came from that's in your end product.
Ah, okay. Okay. So it's a little bit more. It's a more direct. It's a more direct mapping. I guess in lay terms, it's more direct mapping than other methods.
Yes, if there's any attempt to manipulate the transactions, it'll compromise the rest of the chain, so everyone's aware of it. So it's pretty secure. I don't never say never, and there may be someone who may come up with a way to disrupt it, but at the moment it's extremely secure.
Okay. Now, the other things that were mentioned in the article was virtual reality and augmented reality. And I think most of us are familiar with using VR and AR, at least within our area, in manufacturing. So you have assisted assembly and that type of thing, or maybe training where people are trained in a virtual reality environment, or augmented reality where they're seeing instructions come up on their glasses as they're trying to maybe assemble a part or something. But you mentioned that DNV, your company, which is a standards, a certified accreditation body, is using virtual reality and augmented reality. And I was kind of intrigued with that too. How are you guys using that technology?
Well, yeah, we're still probably, it's honest to say, we're at early days of it, but we're starting to pilot some great projects. The idea is, you understand, as we're looking at supply chains and going deeper into this and looking at broader and very large, complex supply chains, we need to provide a level of assurance that also means we have to be in a lot of places that we may necessarily not have easy access to. So we see the benefits of virtual reality and augmented reality from an auditing perspective. Can we get to certain locations, or can we get certain skills to certain locations and be able to provide that, that very competent third-party perspective? So just in terms of getting an auditor to a place virtually, that in itself is very exciting. Then there's also, when we're looking at doing more complex audit of machinery, for example, having an augmented reality environment where you're able to draw on records while you're witnessing a process happening, then you can say, okay, well, if I want access to the inspection records of this machine, I should be able to get it immediately and have access to that portal. That is very exciting. We're not quite fully advanced on some of those, and some of the platforms are yet to be built, but it's very exciting indeed.
So does this mean that an auditor might actually wear goggles, AR goggles, really?
Yeah, it's Minority Report kind of
That's pretty
perspective. That's what we're looking at.
That's pretty scary.
And it's not only allowing our auditors to access places they normally wouldn't access. It gives them more work-life balance, and also for our customer, it's less disruption as well. If we can be more flexible with how we do it, what time, the periodicity, and so on, it's a win-win-win situation.
So in a sense, it allows all these, for the auditor on site, it allows them to have all the pertinent records and information available to them right in front of them. I mean, literally right in front of them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay. Interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
So just winding up here a little bit, where do you see supply chain management headed in the future? I mean, what's technology going to show us in supply chain management in the coming years, do you think?
I hate trying to predict, and in fact, we are in the business of prediction ourselves, and we produce a technology outlook looking at what could happen in 2025. There's so many different possibilities that we know of now, never mind what can be coming out in the next 8 years, that anything is just a snapshot in time. So we talk not just about augmented reality, virtual reality. We talk about using drones to be able to get access into places, physically where we normally don't want to even put ourselves in danger. So there are many different technologies, and I don't want to be that person trying to predict something and then being proven quite wrong. But at the moment, I see a convergence of these, of really being able to provide a greater story all the way to the consumer, not just a snapshot in time.
And it almost sounds like, I mean, kind of the trend I'm seeing through this whole thing that you've been talking about is the ability to, or one of the benefits is the ability to audit without necessarily having to be on site.
Yeah, well, or depend less on that. So
Depend
we
less on it. Okay.
focus our efforts. We can be more focused exactly where we should be, the critical points in the supply chain, but we can borrow on AR, VR, remote sensing, temperature gauges, for example, see that in real time, global positioning systems. There are a lot of technologies that converge, and our job in the future is going to be more about assurance of data as much as it is going to be assurance of the management systems. We'll be looking at how is that data managed, how is it collected. And we have great examples of convergence of data like that in examples in tracking beef in the Amazon, for example, making sure that beef sourced from the Amazon areas in Brazil aren't contributing to deforestation. And that's done with a combination of satellite imagery, RFID, and good old-fashioned auditing techniques in those high-risk areas.
Oh, that's interesting. Well, if our viewers want to know more about this, they can join Tom and myself, as well as Alexis Bateman, Director at MIT Sustainable Supply Chains, in a webinar next week that will talk about the major trends happening today within responsible and sustainable supply chain management. Tom and Alexis will be talking about AR and VR, Internet of Things, satellite imaging, blockchain, of course, we just discussed, and so forth. And these are all disruptors as well as enablers in the broader assurance of supply chain. So that webinar is next week, August 7th at 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern, and there is a link right below the player page down there, so you can click that and go to register. And so be sure to check that out. I think it's going to be really interesting. Okay, Tom, thanks for joining us this morning.
Thank you very much, Dirk. Have a great weekend.
We'll see you next week.